So once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining for a session of Azure Power Lunch. As you know, we record these calls, and if you don't want to record it, you may want to drop off now. With that, today's our topic of discussion is Azure Cross Subscription Load Balancer. So just like we always do, we're gonna do a quick overview of what this service is, which is currently in public preview, and then we're gonna talk about some features and, of course, demo and things like that. Please feel free to ask any question. Please post your question in the chat window, and I will do my best to get to that. Um, so with that, what is cross subscription load balancing and why do we need it? You know that load balancer have different components. You have the backend pool where your VMs or VM scale set is residing, and then you have the front end IP address and the load balancer itself. In number of organization, there is a separation of responsibility. Normally, the backend pool components where your VMs are, they are responsibility of an app team, application teams, which are developing and deploying their solutions. On the other hand, the load balancer sits under the responsibility of the networking team or security team. Okay, so they want clear separation. If they are in the same subscription, there is a chance that there can be a mix and match of responsibility, and they will not be able to control who has, access to these resources, and also um, there is a case where they have to do, a billing to the app teams bill back, so they're getting a bill for those services and that the app teams are using, and they want to bill it back, so just to get it on the um, get the charges distributed across teams. That becomes a challenge if everything is in the same subscription. It's hard to do. I mean, you can do it, but it's hard to do. That's what this thing allow you to do. Have these components spread across multiple subscriptions. So not only that you can have backend pool components in a separate subscription and the virtual network, but you can have the load balancer and the public IP addresses. They can also be in a separate subscription. So these are some of the use cases or scenarios that are possible with this public preview. Okay, uh, so load balancer in a separate pool, front end address, IP address in a separate pool, sorry, subscription, and the backend pool resources they are in a separate subscription. You have load balancer and backend pool resources in one and front end IP address in the other. And the scenario that we are going to be demoing today, we will have load balancer and front end IP address in one subscription and the backend pool resources, which includes the virtual machine, in a separate subscription. So that's the scenario we are going to be demoing today. The documentation is pretty decent, so you should be able to um, I mean, there is no issue in following the documentation. Okay, so you should be able to go through those scenarios if you want to do it yourself. Okay, so with that, let's talk about the yeah, go ahead, question. Okay, so in regards to the cross subscription front end IP configuration, whenever you are doing a front end IP configuration, first of all, it can live in a separate subscription, as I've mentioned. You have to set the tag and forgive the typo. It has to be set the tag to remote front end so that you should be able to um, do that. And that is one of the requirement that is one of the requirement that is needed for this thing to work. The second thing is the sync mode property on the backend pool has to be enabled, and we will talk about the sync mode property and what it does in a second. Okay. And once again, as I said before, public IP addresses, they can be in a different subscription. If you have multiple front ends, multiple public IP addresses, so you can have uh, this type of scenario. let me go to the next slide. Um, you can have this type of scenario where you have one subscription with one public IP address, another subscription with other public front-end public IP address, and then you have another subscription with load balancer and other resources. So you can spread this thing around depending on how your organization wants it. Okay. So as we kind of move further in regards to the backend pools, let's talk about the sync mode. This is the key property here. So whenever you have a backend pool that is using a cross subscription load balancer, you have to set the sync mode to either automatic, which you will be doing in most cases for scale sets and things like that, or manual. Okay. So let's talk about automatic. In the case, but first of all, what sync mode does? Sync mode allows the load balancer to sync changes that are happening in backend pool. It allows your load balancer to do that. So that's with the load balancer configuration. If you set it up to manual, then these changes are not synchronized. You may want to do that if you have certain specific scenario like failovers and things like that, and you want to use the IP based configuration. But in most cases, you will be using, especially with BM scale set, you will be using the automatic, and that's what we are going to be seeing in the demo. And more detail about this will be coming up as this uh, public IP, public preview matures and goes into GA. And also, just keep in mind, cross subscription global load balancer is also there. And for the backends of cross subscription global load balancer, there is no need for a applying any parameter or sync mode or anything. So that is done out of the box, and that is not needed. Okay. Now let's come to the authorization, and this is the key point here. Um, the question normally comes up like, okay, what kind of permission will I need for this thing to work? I mean, of course, in the demo, I am admin on my subscription, so that may not be an issue. But what about when you are doing an actual production deployment? So this is the list of permissions that you have. So you can create a custom role, or you can use one of the roles that has these permissions rolled up for an RBAC-based secure deployment where you can do cross subscription front ends and back ends. Got it? Any questions so far? Okay. So with that, let's quickly jump into a demo. 1 second. Okay. So let's quickly jump into a demo. So first of all, let me introduce you what we have here in this subscription. Sign in again. Let me just try that. So let me just sign in here. Give me 1 second so I can open the um, Azure Cloud Shell, and let me close it. Okay, so first of all, what I have here is a virtual machine, and this is my virtual machine that is running. And there are two subscriptions. This is running in Azure. This is one of my subscription, and then I have another subscription which is hidden here. Uh, Let me just go in here. So these are my subscriptions. So this is the other one that I'm going to be using. So basically, it will be. So what I'm going to be using is in one subscription, I will have the load balancer backend pool resources like virtual machine, and in other subscription, I will be creating the what you call the load balancer itself and front end IP. I have done some of the stuff, as you can see. I have created the, um, let me wait for this thing to go away. I have already created the VM and I have already created the public IP. So just to save time, since we only have 30 minutes, and of course, the virtual network is there. So now let's start creating with the load balancer um, resource. So let's go into that. And I'm going to, first of all, set the active subscription. So let's check what is our active subscription here. AZ account show. It is the right one. That's where I want to deploy the load balancer. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the command. I'm going to paste the command here, and then we're going to take a look at that. Okay. So let's paste the command. So as you can see here, what I'm doing is I am giving the name of my load balancer, and then I am giving the resource address of the public IP address. I'm giving a name of the front end IP. And remember this, I'm setting is remote front end to true. Okay. So that's the command I'm running. It's going to run, take like 15 to 20 seconds, and then it will create the load balancer. Okay. So once that load balancer is created, we will move on to the next step. We will create a backend pool. Okay. So while this is creating the load balancer, I just want to mention it that one thing I want to show you here in the virtual machines. Um, Look at this virtual machine. Doesn't have a public IP. So this virtual machine is living in a VNet, in a subnet, doesn't have a public IP. And that's what I want to show you. Once we assign the load balancer, you will see the load balancer public IP come up here. So this is the public IP that I've already created. So far, it's not attached. So this is the public IP. So once we created, this public IP should show up here. Okay. So load balancer have been created. So that's good. Now let's set up its backend pool. Okay. And once again, I'm going to uh, copy the command. And by the way, all of that is in documentation. And once again, I am creating the backend pool. I'm setting the load balancer name. I'm setting the what is the VNet. And if you see, the important thing is the last parameter, sync mode, is set to automatic. So what it's asking is set the sync mode to automatic so it can sync the instances, any changes to the instances. Uh, that's one of the way to address it. So it's done. Quickly run the command. Now we are going to create two a load balancer probe and a rule. So let's create the probe first. So this is the HTTP probe. It's hitting the load balancer. It's going to be doing on port 80. We're just going to be very simple. We're going to just do the port 80, and then we're going to be creating a rule. So let's quickly go in. So just keep in mind, everything is pretty much the same that you are doing any other load balancer. One other thing, um, uh, so the only difference is we added the sync mode properties and to this scenario. That's the only difference. Just keep in mind one thing, that a UI, for some reason I try to do this thing from a UI is not working. And by the way, in the documentation, the two options they show is CLI and PowerShell. So you pick, I mean, you can pick one of those things. I'm pretty sure the UI support will be there at some point, but it's in public preview. So this is again, I'm very standard. If you look at the CLI, it's no different at all when you are creating the load balancer rules and all that. So this is creating the rule. The rule has been created. Now we are gonna do one last thing. We are gonna switch to the subscription that is where our load balancer um, backend resources are. Okay, so we are going to go back to the other subscription where our VMs are, and we are gonna add the NIC to the load balancer. I mean, that you do if you are doing a load balancer anyways. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna add that NIC to the load balancer configuration. So this is the command to do that. That's why we are switching subscription. So that's what I'm gonna show you in two subscription right now. And uh, let's do that. So what this is doing is it's taking the NIC. I mean, this is the NIC, as you can see, the name of the NIC of that particular VM, and it is adding to the load balancer backend pool. So now it is attached there. Got it? So let's run it for it will take a second to run, and that will complete the loop, and then we just have to add the network security group to this NIC, and we will go from there. Okay. Any questions, folks? Give it a second. It'll take a minute to run. In the meantime, let me go back to the slide deck while this is running. There are some limitations. Some of those may be due to the this thing being in public preview. So please take a look. I mean, just keep in mind that some of the things that once you set, they cannot be changed. Like, for example, once you have the sync mode on a backend pool, you cannot change the sync mode, like, for example, from automatic to manual or vice versa. So these are some of the things that you cannot do. So just keep it. Okay, so now this is complete. Now let's go on to our virtual machine. We are gonna go to this virtual machine and we are going to open it and set the NIC. So into the network settings, we go into our, give it a second since it's, and we have the network security group. So let's set the network security group so we can, it can accept requests from the load balancer. Let's save it. That's good. Now it is saved. Go back to our virtual machines, and interestingly, you should see a public IP now. Let's refresh it. Yes, here is the public IP. Because it's behind the load balancer, it is showing the public IP of the load balancer to you. Okay, so now let's copy that public IP. And what I'm doing is on that particular VM, this is a Linux VM, Ubuntu Linux VM. I am running Apache. So you should see Apache's, startup page there. So let's do that. Okay. This is the Apache startup page. So think of it. We had a VM running in a VNet. We put a load balancer, and load balancer is in a separate subscription. So let's go in and um, and we will take a look at that in a second. And now we have the some resources in one subscription, like load balancer itself, the front end IP, and the backend is in a separate subscription, and we are able to connect to it. So just to prove the point, let's go into our load balancer. Let's click here. Yes, load balancers, and you will see this is the load balancer, and this is in a Visual Studio. This is a separate subscription. On the other hand, our virtual machines, if we go back to it, these are in separate subscriptions. So you see that? I mean, this is this the whole public preview is all about. So let's open this particular load balancer, and you should be able to see some of the things. Like this is the front end IP configuration. For some reason, when you try to change it from here, it doesn't allow you to do that. At least I tried it, didn't work. So that's why I try to do it from the um, PowerShell and CLI, and that's what's documented. So I'm pretty sure the UI support is coming. Okay. Then you have the backend pool, and you have one machine in the backend pool, one rule. You have the health probe, all of the setup that we have done is showing up here. Got it? So that's I wanted to show you here. And I have a little bit more complex example. For example, if we go into virtual machine, you see these two virtual machines, they are in the same VNet. This APL XLB VM3 and VM31, they are in the same VNet, and they are behind. If you see, they will have the same IP address. You see that? Both of them, 155.137.48, because that's the load balancer. So I have a load balancer that is load balancing these two, and I can show you the load balancer here, and then we can go take a look at that as well. This is the load balancer. Same thing. If we go to the backend pool, you should see two VMs, 304 and 305. And on those two VMs, I am running a very simple web page, Hello World web page. So let's go there and take a look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that particular URL. So here is the URL I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste this URL here. So this is the URL. So now it is getting from 304. And just keep in mind, and one thing sometime we and our customer forget, that this is the load balancer, Azure load balancer is a based on 5 tuple. It does load balancing based on 5 tuple. So it will continue to send the request to the same address as long as uh, source IP, source port, destination IP, destination port, and protocol remains the same. As long as this is the same, it's going to keep sending it to the same location. That's why you won't see the IP address change. But if you um, paste this URL on your side, try it, you will see a different IP address, maybe 10.3.0.5, because the IP address is different. So that's the key difference here. That IP address is different, and that's why you should see a different address. This is not a round robin load balancer, so just want to mention that. But in any case, uh, sorry for going on a tangent. The point here is that with cross, you know, this is another example of cross subscription load balancing where we have VMs in a separate subscription and you have load balancer in a separate subscription. And by the way, I can have another front end which is in a third subscription, and that scenario will still work because of this a new public preview. So just want to open it up for any questions, folks. Okay. Please feel free to post question in the chat window if you have any. Otherwise, we will go back to the slide deck. So just kind of doing a quick wrap up. Azure cross subscription load balancing is currently in public preview. This is a feature that allows you to distribute components of a load balancer, which is backend pool, which is front end IP address, which is load balancer itself, across different subscriptions. You know, and this why what are the use cases for that? This is for organizations where you have um, different team responsible for maintaining and managing different resources. So one team is responsible for managing application which is running on VMs. Another team is responsible for load balancers and putting network security on top of it. And also in the cases where you have to back bill to internal teams, like you have resources that are consumed, common resources, and then you have to backfill. So it's easier to do than doing it in the same subscription. So uh, that allows you to make it easier to do separation of responsibility. Okay, so just keep in mind that this feature is in public preview. It is supported with both public load balancer, internal load balancer, and global load balancer. Okay, so all of these are supported. The example that we saw today was for public load balancer. In the documentation, you have an example for internal load balancer. You have one for global load balancer. The key enabler are two things here. One is a, a special tag, which is remote front end true, which you have to apply to the front end IP configuration. And for the backend pool, you have to set the sync mode. Although for global load balancer, sync mode is not required. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about today. If you have any questions, we still have 3 more minutes, so please feel free to ask. Okay. Um, since there are no more questions, thank you so much for joining and hope to see everybody next week for another session of Azure Power Lunch. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thank you, Naveed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.